Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Ventura. I'm Worship Associate Sue Brinkmeyer, and it is really a joy to be with you here this morning, all of you in the sanctuary, and all of you joining us via the wonders of technology. Welcome. As we begin our service, may we take a moment to pause in gratitude to the Chumash people who cared for this land for hundreds of years, and may we think about living lightly on it as we care for the intricate web of existence of which we are a part. Our minister, the Reverend Dana Worsnop, is taking a well-earned day off, and the Reverend Carolyn Price will be in our pulpit today. It is always a joy to welcome her back. Reverend Carolyn was ordained to the Unitarian Universalist Ministry in 2004. She served as parish minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Santa Paula for 8.5 years, and then was here with us as our affiliate minister for 5 years. Carolyn has also served as a longtime organizational consultant to congregations in the Pacific Southwest District. She and her husband, Orville, recently moved back to the area from Tucson, Arizona, so we hope we will be seeing more of both of them in our future. 2 quick announcements this morning. First, our men are beginning again their 5th Tuesday potluck supper, which will resume on May 31st at 6 p.m. in Berg Hall. Men are invited to bring some food to share and a place setting to gather in camaraderie and discussion. Second, we will be gathering back here in the sanctuary at 11:30 today, and also back in this same Zoom and YouTube setting for a congregational meeting about the upcoming church year budget. So, let us breathe together and let us enter sacred space.
I am Worship Associate Rod March. We invite those who are joining us today via Zoom or YouTube to light a chalice or candle at home as we light the chalice of our free faith here in the sanctuary.
It is so good to be back among you. It is not an exaggeration to say that my husband and I have been wandering for 4 years in the desert. It's great to be with you. Our opening words are from the Reverend Kathleen McTeague. We come together this morning to remind one another, to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist that tumble into the next moment, and with awareness, with gratitude, to take the time to look into one another's faces and to see there communion, reflection of one another's eyes. Whether you are here in body or over the waves of Zoom, come, let us worship together.
Good morning. I'm Carolyn Bierke, the music director, and I'd like to welcome you all online and here in the sanctuary. I invite you to join me in singing our opening hymn, Here We Have Gathered. Please rise in body or spirit.
Here we have gathered, gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days of our lifetime, matters small and great. May of all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can, sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regret, but in the shadow let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
Who here had to memorize Bible stories when you were growing up? Anyone? Oh, yes, me too. Well, we don't really do that here as Unitarian Universalists. We do draw from world religions, but we don't actually have sacred stories or sacred texts in a book anywhere. Instead, our stories tend to come from experience, also from history, art, science. If they help us in our search for truth and for meaning, and especially if we've been there to witness them or when they happened, then they become part of our sacred text as a Unitarian Universalist. So you're going to hear some of those stories today from me, and maybe because I've been with you, you know some of them too. This is one of those. I know a number of us have been up to Camp de Benneville Pines in the mountains. It's at 6,500 feet, give or take. It's a forest of conifers. There's cedar, there's pine, and there's fir. In the winter, there's snow. In the summer, it's warm, but not so warm as the flatlands. There's a lake, there's campfires, there's singing. So I just want to tell you something that happened one week when I was there. As I often did when my girls were young, I was minister in residence. So the first day I was there when people were getting settled in, and a mom came. She brought 2 children. Now this was elementary camp. They were 8, 9, a couple 10-year-olds. She had an 8-year-old, but she also had her 17-year-old son. And that first day she told me her story. They'd been driving home one night about a year before from a soccer practice. Both kids were in the car, but they'd been hit. They were in a terrible accident. They were badly hurt, all of them, and in the hospital a long time. She finally had to leave her job as a high-level executive because she needed to stay home and take care of them. A year later, her daughter was getting better. Her son, he looked fine, the 17-year-old, but he wasn't. She'd taken him to therapists and specialists and counselors, to everyone, and she'd done everything that she could think to do, but she was worried still. Before the accident, this young man had been talkative and outgoing and happy. But afterwards, because his brain had been injured, he'd grown very quiet. And while not exactly sad, she never saw him smile. He seemed to her lost and so far away. After all the specialists couldn't help, it was finally the religious education director at her church who said, well, you're taking your daughter to camp. It's a beautiful place. Why don't you take your son too? And as a last resort, and because she couldn't figure out how it could hurt him, and it was beautiful, she knew that, she did bring him. Now, if you've been to camp when there are kids there, or maybe your own kids have told you or your grandkids, they have a tradition of fort building, right? Yes, the camp is in a forest. There's all kinds of sticks, bigger sticks, little sticks, long, short. Now, the kids collect these, and they build these elaborate forts over the course of a week. And that summer was no exception. It started the first afternoon. The little girl in this family was out there with the girls, and there were various groups, girls and boys. The 17-year-old was sitting in the lodge where I was, and he was just reading, but he kept looking up, watching, seeing what was going on. That first day, that's all he did. But on the second day, I think it was the afternoon, something seemed to shift. First, he got up and he moved closer to the window, and then he went out on the patio for a little while, and then finally he walked over. He didn't join a group of boys, but he went about, 6 or 7 feet away from them, and he started building his own fort. Now, Unitarian Universalists, and especially our kids and youth up at camp, we are known for inclusion. We are. So I wasn't surprised so much as I was just really proud as I watched that group of young boys as the older boy started his fort. They didn't stop, they didn't stare, even though he was so much older and so much taller. They just looked over at him from time to time as he worked on his fort, and they worked on theirs, and the forts grew. From inside the lodge, his mom came over to where I was sitting, and we watched. You bet we did. For a few days, we watched. Before and after every meal when fort building happens, his mom and I watched. But watching isn't really the right word, because what we got to do over it was 6 days, was bear witness to something that no medicine, no specialist, no therapist, not even that mother's incredible, steadfast love could do. One day, the little boys who he was working next to, their fort got really tall. None of them could reach the top. They'd been working out there for a while, so they looked over at him. He looked over at them. Now, we couldn't hear, but his mom and I were still watching. In fact, I think we moved our chairs closer to the window. That 17-year-old left his fort, and he walked over to the little boys. They handed him the sticks they'd chosen, apparently, for the top, where they couldn't reach, but he could, and together they finished that fort. And we, his mom and I, we just looked on as that young man, so badly hurt, learned how to be in a group again, how to share, how to talk. We watched as more than that, really so much more, he learned how to play again, which was probably precisely what he needed. Finally, Late in that day, late in the week, we watched as he not only smiled, that boy laughed. With those little boys, we don't know what they were laughing about, but they laughed and laughed. Now, I'll tell you, even now, being there was like watching someone be born again. Someone brought back from a terrible and a lonely distance, and not just the young man, but his mother by my side. As for me, I remembered my Bible stories, and I could almost hear someone somewhere saying, "Do not come any closer. Take off your shoes, because the place you are standing, that place is holy ground."
Each Sunday, this congregation gives away our collection to an organization in the larger community or to funds that help people in our own church. Those of you here in the sanctuary can place cash or a check in one of the baskets in the back after service, or, like the folks at home, you can use the text to give number that is on the screen. Fittingly enough, our offering today goes to Camp de Benneville Pines to make sure camp stays open and available for all of us and our families, regardless of ability to pay. As we prepared for this offering today, we asked Jerry Mendelson to share what Camp de Benneville has meant to him, and here's what he had to say. When our kids Mark and Krista invited us to take a bit of time away from a nearby camp we were all visiting to come and see what their UU church camp looked like, we did. We were quickly impressed with the gorgeous mountainous setting, the cabins themselves, the lodge, craft, and meeting outbuildings, nearby hiking trails, and so much more. Not the least of which was the very inviting, tree-laden outdoor area where in subsequent stays we would do short services and sing. Since that first visit, we've been back to family camps in both summer and winter and enjoyed them thoroughly. There is something quite comfortable and settling in among like-minded friendly families who for the most part are happy to put down their cell phones for a few days, play games, enjoy nature, and sit in a stunning outdoor, I'll call it amphitheater, and sing together the beloved UU hymn, Blue Boat Home. The food is terrific. The first tie-dyed shirt I ever made is passable. The archery range is a blast. The skits are both smile and laugh-provoking, and lifetime memories are easily formed. What a way to get recharged and rejuvenated. Thank you for giving generously, as you always do.
I have lived in the darkness for so long, I'm waiting for the light to shine. Far beyond horizons I have seen, beyond the things I've been, beyond the dreams I've dreamed, are the things I've done. In fact, each and every one are the way that I was taught to run. I am waiting for the light to shine. I am waiting for the light to shine. I have lived in the darkness for so long. I'm waiting for the light to shine. I have lived in the darkness for so long, I'm waiting for the light to shine. Far beyond horizons I have seen, beyond the things I the things I've done. In fact, each and every one are the way that I was taught to run. I
We are so grateful for the generosity of this congregation. It is such an important part of the beautiful connected tapestry of love we weave together.
Because we are connected to one another in so many ways, we take time in our service each week to share with one another the great joys and sorrows that are such important parts of our lives. We place stones in water for each joy or sorrow, and the ripples that go out remind us of the many ways we are connected, and that which touches one heart among us touches the hearts of us all. You can submit a joy or sorrow either through a link on our Thursday email bulletin, UUCV This Week, or from a link on our webpage, uuventura.org. Those received by 10 p.m. on Saturday night will be read Sunday morning. We have 2 sorrows that were submitted this week. From Susan Franzblau, this sorrow. My partner of 25 years and the love of my life, Elva Perez Trevino, just died quite suddenly. She was an incredible avant-garde artist and deeply spiritual person who gave my life meaning and joy. I will miss her terribly. I am very sad. And this sorrow was shared by Rena Pizzuto. I'm feeling overwhelmed with sadness about a very close friend, Chris. She's been in cancer treatment and seemed better, but now she is in hospice and has a fairly short time. The Travel Sisters have known and loved her for over 50 years. We are devastated. I invite you now to speak into the gathered community or write in the Zoom chat the names of those you wish to celebrate or memorialize, or those in need of the loving embrace of this beloved community. Please feel free to continue to post in the chat as Rob places one final stone in the water for all the unshared joys and sorrows that remain in the silent sanctuary of our hearts. May we be truly grateful for all that is our life.
This is the time that we set aside each week to enter into reflection or prayer or meditation, as is your custom. We do this here in the presence of one another, be that in body or across the distance of screens. We do it as a form of centering and of a sort of a spiritual communion. You may want to take a full breath in and out. Maybe place both your feet upon this holy ground. We will begin today with a quiet song, one that speaks to what we can be for one another, to and for one another. Then a reading based on an experience. Following that, we will enter into a time of silence. We'll follow that by an offering of music and image. Perhaps one more breath in and out. Breath from the Latin spiritum, breath, spirit, life. Our song is When I Am Frightened.
When I am frightened, will you reassure me? When I am certain, will you hold my hand? Will you be strong for me? Sing to me quietly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me compassion, then I may learn to care as you do. Then I may learn to care. When I am angry, will you still embrace me? When I am thoughtless, will you understand? Will you believe in me? Stand by me willingly. Will you share some of your questions with me? If you will show me acceptance, then I may learn to give as you do. Then I may learn to give. When I am troubled, will you listen to me? When I am lonely, will you be my friend? Will you be there for me? Comfort me tenderly. Will you share some of your stories with me? If you will show me commitment, then I may learn to love as you do. Then I may learn to love.
The Reverend Clark Dewey Wells liked to tell a story of what happened one night when his little boy was very young. The child was outside, just outside on the porch, as the parents worked to prepare dinner and to do everything that parents do at the end of a full day. He doesn't tell us what else might have been going on for them, what burdens they carried from work or from family or life, just that they were otherwise occupied, really, and then some. At one point, their son told them, come outside to see a star. He'd found one in the sky. You know, they were busy, though. They ignored him at first, but he grew more insistent. So finally, one of the parents said, "We can't now. We'll do it after dinner. We'll do it after dinner if there's time." The little boy kept at it. "Just hold on," they said. But the boy would not stop. Finally, the Reverend Wells said he just ran out of patience, and he told his son, rather sharply, he admits, okay, we see the star. Now we're busy. Don't bother us, please." He describes to the reader what happened next. Upon hearing that, our little son launched himself through that patio porch door, and he fixed us with a fiery gaze, and he said, "You be glad at that star." The Reverend Wells concludes, "I have never forgotten that incident or his perfect words. It was one of those rare moments when you get everything you need for the good of your soul: reprimand, disclosure, and blessing." Now, we cannot command joy or happiness, appreciation or fulfillment. We can't. We don't engineer the seasons of the soul. And yet, he concludes, "I do believe that there is right in that imperative declaration: you be glad at that star."
say, live in the country for a day. We'll be happy and we'll dance. Oh, wanna dance the night away. Woo. If I'm feeling good to you and you're feeling good to me, there is nothing we can do or say. Feeling good, feeling fine. Oh, I'm gonna let myself unwind. Oh, oh, listen to the music. Oh, oh, listen to the music. Oh, oh, listen to the music all the time. Like a lazy flowing river, set on the dancers to the sky.
And the crowd is growing bigger. Listen to the happy sound, and I'm gonna let it flow.
Listen to the music. Oh, oh, listen to the music all the time.
Someday. Actually, I want to take up to some extent where we left off last time. I spoke to you in November, and the sermon was titled Getting There. It addressed what it was then to be still largely in pandemic mode. Things have changed. We cannot say for certain, but most infectious disease specialists really do agree that we are in the very late stage now. The very late stage. Well, by all the power vested in me, in us, as the gathered church, let us proclaim, may it be so. So this morning, I would like us to reflect upon what it is to reassemble after this long, rather difficult time as individuals, as a congregation, as part of a country and the greater human family. The question of human goodness looms. So much has been lost. We hit 1 million deaths in this country alone this week. People in America and all over the world are behaving badly. You know plenty about this, I am sure, but to wit, Russia, the Supreme Court, racism without end, gun violence still on the upswing. I could go on. I won't. You know, I've ceased to be surprised when people come up to me and say they're no longer watching the news, they're not even barely reading it. 1 million deaths have changed us. Politics and fear and loneliness and despair have changed us. And many say not for the better. I believe we are at a crossroads, many of us, in this religious tradition when it comes to the question of goodness. Have we lost faith in human goodness or trust in it? Should we? So history can help us get a start on this. And lest you be having one of those knee-jerk reactions to the idea of doing history, do some of you know about speed dating? It's where people sit in a room and they appraise one another really, really quickly. I'm going to try to do this history kind of like that, okay? Here we go. From our Unitarian side, early on we declared, when almost no other church did, that people are good. All people are good. Everyone. We really meant it, regardless of failure or sin or just being plain downright mean. Everyone was good at heart. From the Universalists, our other side, we said, God is good. And remember, everyone believed in God then. Pure good. Goodness in the highest form. We said God's love is so great, God's goodness so depthless, that every single person is included at all times, including after death. Done with history. Okay. But it is important. Can you see, for just a minute though, how those two denominations found a way, enough common ground to come together as one? We do not hold the kind of certainty that our forebears did, most of us anymore, when it comes to goodness. When we are frightened, as we sang, or troubled, or uncertain, we don't often now turn to a deity, though some do. Instead, many of us turn to one another. And here I think of a novel, Knights and Dragons by Elizabeth Spencer. In it, one of the characters has had a simply wretched day. Everything goes wrong. Everything. By the end of it, this man's work, his faith, his hope, it all feels gone. He walks home, dragging his feet, desolate, lost. But then suddenly he shakes himself off emotionally, and with a great surge of clarity, he quickens his steps because he's remembered that what he longed for, what he needed, was his white kitchen table and his wife's warm brown eyes, under whose gaze he had so often reassembled his soul. And isn't it true, those of us who have been part of this beloved community, who have gathered here side by side, and yes, on Zoom too, that our souls have from time to time been reassembled among these people, these cherished ones. I know that mine has. And I want you to think just for a moment, if you can, of a time when this has happened for you. Our trust in goodness, our belief in it, in its purest form, comes to us first, if we are lucky, when we are very young, from the families who raise us. from the love that made us. And if not, we receive it later through family, not of blood, but of experience. And these people help us to hold onto or to relearn our trust in goodness, even when times are hard, or perhaps especially when they are hard, like they have been for some of us. At our best, we in turn help others to find their way back to faith or trust in goodness when they are lost or afraid or in pain. And this is the goodness that reassures us that in spite of what has happened to us or in the world, in spite of what we have done or what we have failed to do, that we are worthy, we are deserving, and most of all, we are loved. Sometimes we have to slow down. We have to stop what we are doing, as if stepping outside onto a porch to look at a star, to see that hope does remain, that goodness abides here still. Now, there's a lot of this that we can't necessarily plan. And here's another story. It's something that happened to someone who went to the same seminary that I did, Claremont School of Theology, decades ago now. This woman was in her late 20s when this story took place. Despite being a popular minister then and a writer, and oh my goodness, a gifted musician, her life had become hard in a way she'd never known. A love relationship ended. She made some terrible choices, as most of us do sometimes, and thus began a sequence of sorrow that seemed endless and depthless. It worsened over the course of a year until finally one night, she was just filled with the certainty that she had lost her faith forever, not just in God, and she was a Methodist also, as well as a Unitarian, but in the goodness of life. She saw no way out. And here is how she tells it. My despair came to a crisis. It was after midnight. I left my house and I walked down the hill to the lake. My face was wet with tears as I set my course for the water's edge. I had decided to walk into that lake, into its cold darkness, and to find there perhaps the consolation that I could not find within myself. At the bottom of the hill, I walked across the wet grass and I climbed the last rise before the descent to the water. As I crested that rise, though, I discovered a line of shadowy objects between me and the shore, a barricade I would have to cross to get to the water. I didn't remember this barricade, and it was so dark that I couldn't tell what I was seeing. But as I edged closer, I saw that it was a line of human beings, hunkered over strange-looking spindly equipment. I looked closer. Telescopes. There they were, dressed in Gore-Tex, homemade Radio Shack telescopes, a whole group of them, up and alert in the middle of the night because the sky was clear. She finishes. To make my way then to do what I had come to do, I had to get by this group. So I tried to walk by this one enthusiast in tennis shoes, But he was certain that I had come to look at the stars. Here, let me show you, he said, taking my arm eagerly. And he began to explain the star cluster that his telescope was focused on. I had to brush the tears from my eyes to look. But there it was, a brilliant red-orange spiral galaxy. With great excitement, he focused on something else. It was Jupiter, he said. And I peered through, and I could see the giant glowing planet. I could not bring myself to continue my plan then. Faced with a world where people get up in the middle of the night to view the lights of the universe, I simply could not do it. She was glad at those stars. Later, she would say, I know there is goodness, I know there is grace, because my life was saved by the Seattle Astronomy Club. And so it is that this remarkable young woman lived. Not only did she live, she would go on to pastor multiple churches. She would become the first female president of an accredited seminary in this country. Starr King School for the Ministry, people. That is the Unitarian Universalist Seminary, one of them. And she held that post for 25 years. To this day, the Reverend Dr. Rebecca Parker, ordained Methodist and Unitarian Universalist minister, gives back the goodness that she was given by strangers that night by a lake. So as we reassemble ourselves, our relationships, even our church, it may help to hold on to this core of our religious tradition that tells us goodness is not just part of who we are, it is part of why we are. It may help to hold on to believing that a renewal of goodness, a return to trust in goodness can happen. It can happen for you, for others, for a church, a country, maybe even for our one beautiful, broken earth. We do not think like this because of a sacred scripture. We think like this because experience has shown us the way. It has shown us that this can happen from the time we are very young until the very end. It can happen high on a mountain at a camp in California. It can happen on the shores of an urban lake in the middle of the night. It can happen at our very own kitchen table. And certainly, it can happen here. And when it does happen, it is the light returning. It is love dispelling despair or fear and making way again for the hope and the goodness we thought had forsaken us. It is our souls reassembled. From the beginning, people have made songs about this, to sing to their children before bed, to sing so that the kids will not be afraid or alone. We sing these songs to reassure them, to comfort them, to fill them with love, and to send them gently to rest in goodness. We will sing one of those songs now. Please join with me, with one another. Rise as you are willing and able. Join us at home and let us sing, Sleep, My Child.
Sleep, my child, and peace attend you all through the night. I who love revealing visions of the day, revealing praise, a pure and holy feeling all through the night.
Please join me in reading the words on the screen as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. Those we carry into our lives until we are together again. Shortly after Reverend Carolyn offers the benediction, those of you joining us via Zoom will see an invitation on your screen to join a breakout room for conversation in small groups. At 11:30, you'll be invited to join the congregational meeting on our next year's church budget via the same Zoom YouTube connection. Those of you here in the sanctuary are invited to grab some tea or coffee out back after the benediction and postlude. I remind you that you are welcome to put something for the offering in the baskets at the rear as you leave the sanctuary today. We hope you will return here to the sanctuary to be part of the congregational meeting on the budget.
Go now in peace from this beloved place and people. Go with our love. Rest in goodness. Abide in hope. Hold to the question of all people of faith across time and distance. As your heart, your mind, your soul is reassembled, how will you give that back to the world? And this, today, most of all, when you can, whenever you can, wherever you can, you be glad at that star. Amen, shalom, and namaste.